Today on WTF, we're showcasing the versatility of cassava and how to use it to make a grain-free, gluten-free crepe. Hello and welcome to WTF, where we help you transform food in your kitchen. I'm Janie.
And I'm Hannah.
And today we're talking all about cassava, or as you might know it, tapioca, and how do you use this versatile ingredient to make a grain-free, gluten-free crepe. So remember, if you like what you see here and you want more content like this, remember to subscribe and stick around for our weekly giveaway. Now, cassava root, which we have right here, is a plant native to South America, Brazil, and tropic climates. And it's a really great ingredient because it's rich in vitamins, it's rich in starches and carbs, it's really, really healthy, and a lot of us use it every single day in the form of tapioca starch. But we wanted to explore this plant a little bit more to see what else can we do with it in its more natural forms. So, before Hannah dives into today's demo, what we first wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about is the difference between how you normally use cassava, which would be a tapioca starch, versus something like a cassava flour. Do we have that here on the table?
Yes, I do have a bowl.
Yeah. So the difference is that tapioca starch is highly modified. You're using to thicken, to bind, kind of like a cornstarch, whereas cassava flour, which we see here, is finely ground, less processed, and it's really great for substitutes in gluten-free recipes, kind of like rice flour or almond flour. But we're like, okay, what else can we possibly do with this plant? So we were thinking about how starchy it is, and we have this amazing product. It's called Amylase, and Amylase is used to break down the starches and turn them into sugars. And we're like, okay, so we know we can do this. How do we then use it to make a really delicious dish out of it? So I'm going to let Hannah talk you through what we did and kind of how, and as we're going along, we're going to talk about, like the role of amylase and the different ingredients and how that's all coming together. All right, Hannah, I see you have some cassava here.
Yeah.
Well, what do we do with it?
All right, so cassava, it's super versatile. I mean, people use it in breads, cakes, stews, fritters. There's a whole bunch of uses, and people all over the world use cassava in their dishes. So we wanted to do something a little bit different, something I hadn't really seen anywhere, and that is making a cassava puree. But the issue with cassava is it is super starchy, and just for a little comparison, out of the carbohydrates in cassava, it's 70% starch. And if you're comparing that to, say, a potato, which is between 9 to 20% starch.
Really? Okay.
So you can see cassava has a whole lot of starch in it, so that's going to make making a puree kind of difficult because it's going to be super thick. So that is why we are bringing in the amylase here, which is actually going to take those starches and break it down into simple sugars. So just for a little comparison here, this is our cassava puree made with the amylase.
Yeah,
so you can
very
see,
light, very creamy.
very fine. And then this is it without the amylase. You can see it's really gluey. You wouldn't be able to mix this into anything. It's just not going to work out.
Yeah.
So what we did was boiled the cassava first, and so these are both boiled, both blended. But the thing with the amylase is after it's boiled, we fill it, we cover it up with water, and then we add in the amylase, and we let that sit overnight. And overnight, the amylase is going to break down those starches. And it's going to give us a finer puree, and it also brings out this really nice sweetness in the cassava naturally.
Cool. All right. So how do we go about starting that process?
Yeah. So we are going to start by boiling the cassava. We are not going to do that on camera, but I'll just kind of show you how to cut it up because this is a really dense root.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to be careful, and I found it easiest just to work around it and start by cutting it into smaller chunks.
Yeah, the skin is pretty thick on this, and one of the things about cassava is that you actually cannot eat it raw. It's toxic, so you have to cook it to make sure it becomes safe to consume.
Yeah, and I'll just make another note is that they do recommend you discard your water after boiling it. So when you're putting the amylase in, replace the water that you just boiled it with fresh water, just so no toxins at all.
Yeah, good point.
So we're going to want to remove, there's this pretty thick woody exterior, and you're just going to want to, comes off pretty easily. Just go around with your knife.
Yeah, almost like peeling it.
Yeah, and there's actually 2 layers. You kind of have this pink layer underneath. You're going to want to remove that too. And just peel it right off, just like that.
Yeah, and then when you're boiling it, obviously it depends on like how much, you know, how much cassava is in the pot and all this stuff. But approximately for this bowl that we have right here, how long did you end up boiling that for?
It's only about, say, 10 to 15 minutes, kind of similar to boiling a potato. So you're going to want to start it in cold water, not to shock the starch. Let it bring up to heat, and then boil it for 10 to 15 minutes. And at that point, I'll show you it's going to fall apart. It's fork tender. That's what you're looking for. And then at that point, we can just do another little demo. Just gonna, as easy as just putting your cassava, your water, make sure it's completely covered. And then we have our amylase, which we are using a little bit of a higher percentage than recommended. Just as I said before, this is a lot of starch, so we want a lot of enzyme power.
Yeah, and the nice thing about amylase is that it's such a flexible ingredient. So if you've been with us for a while, you might have seen it come up in mostly using plant-based milk. So it's breaking down starches in like oats and barley, and then we use that to make like really nice, you know, oat milk and barley milk. And there's like tons of other applications in baking and whatever too. So of course amylase will be this week's giveaway, and you can enter to win by leaving in the comments below what would you use your cassava puree in. Like what kind of recipe would you feel like would really make it shine? Because one of the really great things, and I think Hannah already mentioned this, is that once you get this puree right here, this has a really great natural sweetness, no sugar added, because the amylase is converting your starches into sugars. It's not like super sweet, but it's definitely like a very pleasant, light sweetness. So I really like that flavor, and I think it goes great with pretty much everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we got the amylase in the water. How long do we soak that for?
So I'd recommend overnight, so 8 to 10 hours. And you're going to actually want to leave this out at room temperature, just because amylase doesn't work. Say if you put it in the fridge, the enzyme, it's not going to be active. So best to cover this in plastic wrap. I'd push the plastic wrap right onto the surface of the water, just so you're not contaminating anything. And then you're going to want to leave that overnight. And then you can just go ahead and blend that up. I would remove some of the water, but having a little bit of extra water in there is just going to make the puree just a little bit finer. And all right, if we want to get into making the crepe batter.
Yes, so I'm really excited about this crepe because it's grain-free, it's gluten-free, so if you're on that diet, but the texture is really nice. And I think a lot of times when people do gluten-free recipes, they do use like tapioca starch in order to act as a binder. So this is kind of it's not going to have the same texture as a tapioca starch, but what we found is that you're able to get a really smooth, beautiful batter, as we will see here.
Yeah, and so this is a pretty basic crepe recipe. We're kind of just substituting our cassava products for, say, AP flour. So here we have our cassava flour. And of course you could make this with other flours, but we are sticking with cassava to make this gluten-free.
And also, like, just the texture is really nice too, but you can certainly try it if you like.
Yeah, and you can find cassava flour really easily. Bob's Red Mill has it. You can find it at any grocery store. So we're just going to add some salt. All right, and we have whole milk. Of course, if you want to also make this vegan, well, there's eggs, but you can also substitute a non-dairy product.
To make it dairy-free.
Yes. All right. All right, so we have 2 eggs and 1 egg yolk here. Add that in.
If at some point you're like, I would like to see this in the vegan version, let us know. I'm sure we can find a substitute for the eggs.
A little bit more milk, and then we're gonna add our cassava puree. And we will have all the measurements online, of course. Oops. Right, so this is going to be the texture, of course, of crepe batter. So it's pretty thin, a little bit thinner than a pancake batter.
Yeah, and with a traditional crepe batter, usually it's recommended that you let it rest a little bit. Do we do that with this, or it's pretty much ready to go?
I've found that it's ready to go right after. And you're going to want to cook this at a pretty low heat. I found around 180 is good, so that is what we're going to go ahead and set. Oops. This thing likes to yell at me. All right. Oh, wait. I was going the wrong way. That's a terrible noise. Okay. So we're just going to let our pan heat up, and then we'll be ready to make some crepes.
Okay, we'll be right back.
All right. So this is a 1/3 cup of cassava. You could do more or less, but.
I like crepes a lot because they cook really fast, the kids always love them, and you can basically stuff them with anything. So while that's cooking, do we want to talk about this one that we make? Because I know we're demonstrating the savory crepe today, but we also made a sweet version.
Yeah, so we kind of wanted to stick with a South American theme here because cassava is naturally grown in South America. That's actually one of the largest exports of it. So we decided to make two versions. We're going to demonstrate our savory version in just a second, but we also made a sweet version, which is a Mexican chocolate sauce. So that has some chili powder in it, some cinnamon. We have a little bit of whipped cream if you want to go ahead and add some of that.
Sure.
This would be really good with some strawberries or raspberries, but
bananas,
any type of fruit.
Yeah. So I just want to kind of, while this is cooking, I just want to cut into this so we can see the texture of this crepe. You can kind of see it's so soft. It's very, very flexible, very pliable, and it has a great texture. It's chewy, light. We have that natural little bit of sweetness. It's not overpowering anything, but it's there. It's super nice, and this is just a perfect crepe right now.
So we've got our finished crepe over here. You can see nice and golden brown. Beautiful. Nice and round as well. So we're just going to go ahead and plate this up. So for our savory version, what we did was we made a kind of a Mexican style pulled pork with some herbs and spices, some chilies, jalapeno, some Corona. Can't go wrong. And then to pair with that, we made a quick version of a mole sauce. Usually mole can take a day or more to make. So this one's a quick and easy version of that, and you can find that on our blog. But so for our filling, we're just going to go ahead and take a few scoops of our pork.
And of course, you can fill it with whatever you like. So remember to leave in the comments below what you would do with it and enter to win. Because I think, I love crepes. That's one of my favorite foods. It
So
really
versatile.
Is. Yeah.
All right.
Ooh, that looks great.
Okay, so just give this a quick mix. You don't have to mix this up. You could just dump it all together. But we're going to go ahead and lay this in our crepe. All right.
Ooh, it looks delicious.
And to top it off, we just have some pickled vegetables. Just goes really nicely with it all. There you go.
This looks so good. All right, so I'm just gonna pick it up with my hands. I was gonna try to cut it, but that wasn't going to work. It's almost like a little taco. Super good. I needed a tissue. I don't have one. That's okay. Great. It's soft. It's warm. It's perfect. You don't need anything else with it. I love the flavors on the mole, sauce, and the pork. It's really easy to make, but of course, do whatever you would like with it. I'm sure it'll be delicious. And as always, you can get all the links in the description below. And until next week, from here in a Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen, I'm Janie.
And I'm Hannah.